Okay.
It's a delight to welcome Robyn Ashley on the show. She is the next country music superstar from Edmonton, Alberta. How are you today, Robyn?
Thank
Thank
you.
you for joining us.
I'm good. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. Um, so I should like to begin by saying that you had your debut single, Sweet Goodbye, is available on all streaming platforms. It's your first foray into country music. So tell us about that single.
Yeah, it came out in April. Yeah, so this one's it was really a fun process for me. So I've been kind of singing my whole life. I I just feel like life is it's very short, and I feel like you know what you need to do what makes you happy. So I really started um working towards kind of recording and releasing music as my own. And Sweet
Mhm.
Goodbye was probably the third or fourth song that I had recorded, and it was the one that I was like, you know what, this is the one I want to put out as my first single. And yeah, it's done pretty well. Like, it's for my first one, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it's fun, I think it's energetic, I think it is a good kind of bass track to kind of put out to people, just to kind of introduce them to me and to my sound, and set them up for some other singles that are coming in the hopefully near future, and kind of like that. But it's a really fun song. It was inspired just by, you know, a real life relationship I had, and we kind of ran with it. So
Mhm. And according to the song, the relationship may not have gone well in that is breakup songs, right?
yeah, no, it didn't. It didn't go well. It's one of those things where sometimes people are, you know, how they're in your life for a reason or a season. It definitely wasn't a forever one, but it was one that, you know, was there for a season, and taught me some things. And yeah, you just kind of move on, write the song, and move on. But yeah, it was definitely a good way to close that kind of chapter of my life and kind of go forward for sure.
I see. Yeah. I'm thinking about how intense it can be to fall in love as well as to fall out of love. And I wonder if,
Yeah.
in your experience, what makes it so?
Um, so I don't know. I think falling in love is it's such a timeless thing, right? It's like it's so fun, and it's one of those things where, like, you know, you're on that cloud nine, and you're so happy, and the aura around you is so bright. And I think that that concept of falling in love is one that you should never lose, even when you experience falling out of love, right? Like, because falling out of love sucks, right? We've all been there. It's hard, and you go through as much as sometimes you can acknowledge the fact that a relationship, or it doesn't matter if it's a romantic relationship or a friendship or whatever, but when you have a love for somebody in general, and that relationship kind of ends or takes a different direction than what you thought, that's hard. Like, and um but I don't think it should stop people from wanting to start that process over, because not every relationship is going to end in the out of love kind of situation. But at the same time, like, I think lots of times people let that maybe experience of falling out of love influence their ability to be open to love in new capacities. Yeah, and that's kind of like another thing Say Goodbye is about too, right? It's an empowering, like, you know what, that's, yeah, you want to be open to love all the time. I think that's a really important way to live life, just so you can experience it to its full potential, for sure.
Yeah, and I think as someone who goes through one or two very bad breakups, I certainly find my concept of love and romance radically change. Yeah,
Yeah.
since before I started the relationship, and I'm reminded of this great line from a Smith song. It goes, but my faith in love is still devout, and that is what I feel. Uh, you know, after a dis a dissolution of not just a relationship even, but a friendship, which I've seen way more of recently.
Yeah. And and yeah, like losing like close relationships of any kind is like super um difficult in lots of ways. And I actually learned through, I don't want to say through COVID, because like that's it's but I really found that like human connection is such an important thing in general. Do you know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
COVID kind of impacted that a lot, obviously. And um I was actually recently in a car accident, and it was like I'm fine. Like it's not like it was a super bad one, but it was bad enough where I had to adjust. I was on a recovery plan and that type of thing, and the my connection with people really diminished because I wasn't going out and doing my usual things, and like it was like that was probably the most impactful part of that experience for me was like not connecting with people the same way. Like that's so important, and I realized like how important that is for me in my life. So yeah, friendships are a huge part of that for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Of
Mhm.
course, we both survived COVID-19, and yeah,
Yeah.
the pre-COVID world felt like centuries ago, and I wonder how that living through that affected, your own closest relationships.
Yeah. So like I I think I'm somebody who like I stay connected a lot to people by like phone. So like because I'm so busy and stuff, like I'll if I'm driving in my car, I'll literally phone somebody. I'm like, hey, who haven't I talked to this week? And I'll phone them and I'll talk to them quickly on the phone and just make sure I have those touch points. But I think it just changed how we connected with people, honestly, right? Like I'm really, especially in the music scene specifically, I would say we're back to normal, which is really good. Like, especially there's live music, there's live shows, you're going to concerts, you're connecting to people that way, which is really amazing. But when that wasn't happening, it was really nice to see how people were creative to make sure that human connection could stay somewhat relevant and at top of mind. But now that everything's back to normal, I'm really happy that like the live shows are happening and I can meet my friends at a concert. Like Shania Twain was in Canada
Oh,
recently.
right, yeah, yeah.
So that was really fun. Um and yeah, and I'm going to I don't know what shows I have. I don't know if I have any booked up, but there's lots of summer festivals coming. So that's kind of cool to get all that started. So that stuff is a big part of like just staying connected with friends and family and even just summer, like going to my parents' house or but yeah, I mean, it's a priority for me to at least a couple times a week make plans with the people I care about and stay connected with them for sure.
I know, right? Yeah. And
Mhm.
have you had a chance to perform Sweet Goodbye live?
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually singing it live in Calgary. I have a show, a little show in June, so in the middle of June. So I'll be doing it there. I'm actually trying to think of if I've done it. Like I've done it like in little areas with my friends and stuff, but not actually at like a show. So my first one's in June. And I have another one in August I'm gonna do, but I'm excited for that. It's always fun to sing these songs live once they kind of because they take on a different life in a live
Mhm.
performance versus a studio track. And Sweet Goodbye, I did a lot of harmony layers on that song, so it'll be interesting to do it live and see how it translates that way for sure.
I wonder if you would see you would include Shania Twain as one of your influences. She's Canadian too, right?
Yeah, she's Canadian, so I definitely would like. I would say like and I'm kind of at a unique stage because I have one song out. I have another one song coming out June 9th.
Mhm.
Um, very different from Speak Goodbye. And then I have another one coming out, and I haven't decided if I'm going to put it out in August or September. But essentially, like they're all very different. I'm kind of at the stage where like I'm kind of showing people different sides of me to kind of determine the kind of where I'm kind of going to go as an artist, but I'm very much a country rock girl. Like I have a very edgy tone to my voice and I really like strong rhythms and beats. And so Shania Twain is definitely, she's an icon. Like she's definitely, everyone knows her songs. And for me, why I look up to her so much is because when you go to a Shania Twain's show, everybody is singing like every song lyric for lyric at the concert, right? And for me that demonstrates like the human connection piece, and her music connects people and it brings people together in a unified way, and that's really what I want to do. It is for me like the joy that I get from singing people's songs in the car. I just want to do that for other people too, and I think that's essentially why I've started to really um become more serious as an artist and really put music out there as my own so I can hopefully create that connection with people.
I understand. Very lovely to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about your upcoming singles that you have in the back burner.
Yeah, so I have a song coming out in June, and honestly, Sean, I'm actually pretty nervous about it in the sense that like it's a song that's really close to me. And it's more of like a country ballad. It's not a fast upbeat song like Sweet Goodbye was, and it's a country ballad. It's called Empty Frames, and it's derived from a real life situation I had where kind of same concept of love, but I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where like and it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, it can be anybody, but where, you know, someone decides that they want to alter the dynamic of your relationship, they don't really talk to you about it. Like they make that choice without you, and you kind of are blindsided by the fact that something that's so meaningful in your life has changed, and you don't know what to do about it, or you don't know how to react to it. So this song is kind of about that, and just how you know, when people make those decisions without you, and you kind of have to fight for what you love and care about, and whether that's a relationship or whatever it is. So that one's interesting, and the reason it's coming out in June is because the incident that prompted this was actually an incident within my family, and with the most important, you know, I would say the relationship I had with my grandfather was like the most important relationship I had in my life, and it was a situation kind of around that, and it was 5 years ago this year. So as like a healing process, and just me kind of moving through that situation after he passed and all those things, I was like, it's 5 years, I'll put the song out, and I can hopefully use that as part of my healing process and move on, and hopefully people will connect with it. And if they don't, that's okay, but it's definitely very different from Sweet Goodbye. It's a ballad, and it's a lot more of a different song. And then the one that another one I have worked on is called Unto Me. It's about self-talk. It's like how you talk to yourself, to like and how that matters. Like how you talk to yourself matters, and how you want to, like, you know, be positive to yourself, and you know, put the pedal to the floorboard and just like live your best life, and like what does that mean to you, right? And then there's another one that's just kind of a rocker that that we're kind of working on right now. So I don't know, there's lots of fun ones. They're also different, which is cool with music, right? You can make them also different. So
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm excited for all of them. And I think by the time that this episode comes out, I think at least two of those songs will have been released.
oh, good. Okay. Yeah. I try and put them like, I don't know, like 8 weeks apart. So yeah, June 9th is one, and then hopefully in August or September. But I think, yeah, it will be really exciting, and it's just fun. I don't know. And did you ever get like nervous starting your interviews, your podcast? Like, did you ever get nervous about that at all, or
Oh,
no?
yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's a scary thing, right? Putting yourself out there, because you don't know how people are going to receive stuff, right? And you just want to, you know, do what you can to share what you love with the world. But yeah, it's definitely a vulnerable place.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Mhm.
yeah, I wonder if that's the same with your releasing your music too. How would you describe that feeling?
Yeah, it's Sweet Goodbye. I was really excited. I was really excited about Sweet Goodbye, and I think it's because it was my first one, and like I've played that song for my friends and family, and a few other people, and I think it was a good one to kind of set the stage and say, okay, like this is my first single. I'm kind of entering the game in this way, and so I was really excited about it. Um this one on June 9th, I'm nervous. And I think it's just because like I love the song, and I think at the end of the day, all it like it I need to like it, and that's what matters. And I do, but it means something to me, right? Like I know what came from that song. I know what it's about. I know like what parts of my heart that kind of song is kind of reaching. Whereas you never know how it's going to be received from other people. So I'm just kind of interested to see the feedback on it, and hopefully people connect with it. It's a pretty universal message, but yeah, I do definitely get nervous, definitely. Some of the other ones that I have, I'm kind of excited about, because I'm normally a very upbeat person, and I have lots of energy, and I like music like that. So when the music is that I make is more in line with who I am in that regard, I'm a lot more confident in it. Whereas this one's so different, but it's also shows sides of me that I don't show people also. So it's kind of um yeah, different, right? Because I don't necessarily show people those other sides of me all the time. I come off as very Robyn, right? Like just upbeat and, you know, positive and those things. So the song on June 9th, yeah, I definitely get nervous, and we'll see. I'm sure it'll be fine, but you know.
Mhm. Well, I'm in great anticipation of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks.
I should add that the reason why I started this show to begin with, and
Mhm.
I think I may have told this origin story one or two times on other interviews, podcasts, but it started out as a radio show in when I was studying in Peterborough.
Right.
And the way I see it, there are two things that I wanted to do. One is to talk about music, because I don't find that people whom I know in real life has the kind of ability to talk about music the way that I do.
Right.
Nowadays, I think I found one or two people who can do that, but at the time, virtually nobody. Um, and secondly, I find that those chat shows where musicians are interviewed, whether it's on radio and such, they never really focus on anything aside from, well, what is the current song that that musician happens to have released, and they may have
Mhm,
spent like 2 3 minutes about it, and then maybe once more about whatever funny anecdote that the musician has, and then it's
mhm,
over. There's no deeper investigation or expression about the various inspirations that comes to his or her music, or even
mhm,
what he or she is thinking about at that time that gets his mind going or troubles her. So I
mhm.
so I hope to achieve that, and I think most of the time I'm successful because I think I got to ask the questions I wanted to ask, and I for the most part get the answers that I uh was expecting and more.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting too is like artists or people who sing or do music or any type of art, it doesn't matter if it's music or not, like we're all people. Do you know what I mean? So we all have experiences and mindsets and value sets and foundations that we have that drive us in our artistic craft, right? So and everyone's so different. So I think that's a very fair and interesting lens to take. And it's kind of nice to hear you say that because you know what, something I might be thinking when I'm going through my music journey is totally different than someone else, right? Or it might be the same. Like there's lots of commonalities with artists too, in terms of how we feel about certain things and just like the imposter syndromes that some of us feel sometimes and like all this stuff. But at the end of the day, like what drives the what's the reason behind our music? Sometimes it's not super deep and sometimes it's really deep, like my song on June 9th, like it's probably the I don't know if I'll ever go through anything in my life again that will impact me as much as that situation did 5 years ago. And it's nice to be able to share that with people so they have an understanding of where your head was at when you were writing that and going through that process for sure. So I appreciate that. That's nice that you care about that lens of it. Because you're right, lots of people um, just talk about the surface level stuff, which is fine too. But yeah, it's nice to hear that.
Mhm. Yeah, so
Mhm.
the tagline of the show, which used to be called Musically Speaking until I changed it, because
Yeah.
the topics, the variety of the topics that I cover on this show have expanded, so it's not just include music. So the tagline of the podcast is thoughtful conversations with interesting musicians and thinkers, and I put that forward every time I send emails to people I want to have on as a guest, including yourself.
Mhm.
And you wrote back, I'm someone who really appreciates intellectual and thoughtful discussion. And so
Yeah.
that got me very excited to have you on this show. So yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I honestly think that like, and I mentioned it a little while ago, but like I just think that like life is so time is like such a valuable currency. And this almost comes up in every conversation I have, but I think it's just because it's tied to everything I do. Like how I live my life is based on the fact that like time is just a valuable currency. And I think it's so easy to um let days go by and months go by and not necessarily achieve something, but it's not that you have to achieve something, but like I think it's just fill your own cup. And there's so many people in my life who um we have a lot of personal conversations about mental health and all these other things, and it always comes back to like, well, what are we as individuals doing and how are we accountable to our own life make to fuel our own happiness, right? And I think that with work and responsibilities and stuff that can get so lost. And so I really just appreciate talking with other people and having meaningful discussion and any about anything that adds meaning that they care about. So if someone's passionate about something, I definitely want to talk about it because I like to see what other people are passionate about, but it also gives them light, right? And I love to learn from other people because everyone has different passions, and mine's music, and yours is obviously music and intellectual conversation and talking to different types of people and thinkers. And I have a friend who's really passionate about acting. I have a friend who's really passionate about like sports, and like it's just fun to see people in their element where they light up. Do you know what I mean? And I think there's a lot of value to that. Um, and those are the moments we should be kind of chasing, because life is just so short. Like, you don't know at any point, like, when our time is up for any of us. And I really just want to make sure I live each day and do my best to, that if I were to, heaven forbid, get diagnosed with something tomorrow or something like that, that I could look back and be like, yeah, I'm really happy with my life. Right. And I don't know if a year ago I could do that. I can now. Like, I think I'm definitely getting there now, but I think a year ago or a year and a half ago, I don't know if I would look back and be like, wow, I'm really happy with everything I've done, because there's so many things I didn't do. Like, I didn't have a song out. I was working on it, but like, there's certain things that, like, we all have certain milestones in our head that we want to reach. And for me, it's really important that we do what we can to support ourselves and our family and friends and people we love in reaching those milestones. And even if it's talking about it or reinforcing encouragement, showing up for people is really important to me. Like, I do my best to show up for everybody I can, and like make them like feel cared about and feel supported, because they are, right. And I think lots of people don't do things they want to do because they just feel like there's not a much, they don't have a lot of encouragement, and that's a hard thing. So I want to make sure that I can do that whenever I can. So
Mhm. You know,
sorry, that was kind of long-winded, but yeah.
uh, it's okay. These answers sort of excite me in some ways because gives me a lot to think about, and I hope it gives listeners a lot to think about too.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about when I was growing up. I think it was around middle and to high school. So
Mhm.
I grew up in Vietnam, by the way. Um, Many of my peers, they often have these things called like my 5-year plan, in that they uh they plot out
Yeah.
almost to the exact day what their life is going to be in 5 years
Yeah.
time. And they started this when they were 13 or when they were 18 or whatever.
Yeah.
um I'm sure the plan's always open to revision, but the problem with that is that they believe that life is so predictable. Well, I mean, nowhere in their hypothetical 5-year plan do they account for the fact that, they may, whether or not they may even be alive the next day, because we don't know that.
Right.
That's not something that we have any idea of.
Hmm.
So and secondly, they make they make it so that they live their life in a very predictable manner, and they are not open to the possibility that life throws you one curveball after another. I think, for example, when I was in high school, I never thought that I would do this, and
Hmm.
when I started doing this program, I never thought that I would keep doing this for another year, let alone to this day. And
Hmm.
yeah, there are times when I literally feel like life has no purpose for me. So this is what those people with their 5-year plans do not understand, I don't think.
Well, and it's hard because even like, so my outside of being a musician or an artist, I work in human resources. So that's like what I do from Monday to Friday, type. That's my job. And a lot of times, like I'm more of in a strategic role now, but when I was first starting out, I was heavy into the recruitment lens of that type of job, helping companies like with the recruitment strategies. And so many people would ask yourself where you want to be in 5 years. And it's a good, I mean, that question comes all the time. And it's not that it's a bad question, but I think that people can have, definitely, I think it's important that people need to have roadmaps and blueprints and like and plans to achieve where they want to be. I think it's good to have a sense of vision and a sense of direction. But I also think if you stick so stringent to that you don't account for maybe some twists and turns that may lead you in other ways. Like you have to be adaptable, and you have to take what comes and adjust and react, and also like maybe change direction if you need to. If because I don't, especially when you're in your high school and in your 20s, like I can say now I know exactly who I am, and I know my core foundation. I know what my value sets are. But 10 years ago, I think people are still trying to figure out who they are and what their passions are and what those things are. And I think when you have such rigid plans around that type of um experimental phase in your life, like sometimes that can be limiting, but it doesn't not to say it's bad. It's just, you have to be aware of exactly what you said. You have to be aware of that sometimes things change and how can you adapt? Because like the sense of vision direction, totally a good thing. But at the same time, like not to a point where it restricts other things that may come into your life because I don't know. Like I think lots of where my friends are right now, lots of my friends are at that phase of life where they're getting married and having kids and all that stuff. And it's really easy to look across the fence and look at people who are kind of in your circle and say, okay, well, they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this. I don't have that. And then you kind of feel like you have it, your plan isn't kind of working out. But that doesn't mean what you're doing isn't significant or doesn't matter. And I think that's a lot of thing people experience too, is that comparison is a really dangerous thing, especially when you have those plans, because I think people oftentimes don't highlight the things that they are working on or doing, and that's important too, because comparison kills joy, right? So
Yeah, I certainly believe that the only person, and I'm emphasizing the only person that you
yeah.
should compare yourself to is you from the past. And that, other than that, it's just unhealthy.
100%.
Yeah,
It's
and
hard though. Like, do you compare? I don't know. I don't know if it sounds like you might be really good at managing that, but as an artist, that's something that's actually really hard because you get so inspired and you look at people like, wow, that's so awesome, or oh, I love that song or whatever. And it's really hard to not sometimes. So you really have to be really confident and sturdy in who you are as yourself and as an artist and as a person. And that comes with time too, for sure. But
yes, when you look at musicians, especially who have had a very long career in the arts, you realize that that is a very rare thing to achieve. Like most
yeah,
musicians do not even catch their big break, let alone having continued success for
yeah.
decades in a row. Thinking of people like David Bowie, for instance. He's been around since the 70s. Of course, he passed away in 2016, but that in itself signifies what, 46 years in the business, maybe even more. And obviously, I've my favorite of the Bowie albums, and there are many to choose from, is Black Star, of course, and
Yeah.
it is a wonderful meditation about life and death and mortality, packed into like these like experimental jazz tracks, which are just wonderful. I think there's a story that goes that when Bowie was living in New York, he stumbled upon this uh, jazz quartet in a bar somewhere, and he was so amazed by their sound that he decided to invite them to be the session musicians for his album. And
Wow.
but I was getting at that point where, how does someone with that level of longevity reflect on their, I guess, life, both personal and artistic? And I think for Bowie, he did that with utter brilliance, like he remembers things with a little bit of bittersweetness. I think.
Yeah, and like it's so interesting too, because when you're talking at a recent reel I saw just popped in my head, and it was about how like, you know, people can pursue whatever they want. Like you really can. Like you can try and pursue whatever you want, but there's always a cost. And I think that's where like, it's really interesting where people kind of decide to take their lives because nothing comes for free in the sense where if you like, let's say if you want to be a CEO, for example, and I have a friend and she's amazing, she's brilliant, she's like, gonna be a CFO at a really noble organization here coming up. She's done so well, but she works so hard, and that's where all of her time and energy goes. But then there's a cost because
Yeah.
she doesn't have the time or energy to give to other areas of her life, right, at this time. And so if you think about even artists, like, there's so many things even I've had to pull back from that I consider important, just to put more energy and time into what I'm doing, or or even parents, right? Like, people have family, like there's certain times. So no matter what you're pursuing or what you're putting your time into, like nothing, there's always a something that happens. And I think where people, especially artists who choose to and have careers of that kind, like you're right, it's rare, and there's a cost to that, right? And some people, and same thing, if people want to be high executives, like people have to decide, if they're willing to pay what those costs are. And I think it comes down to, like, especially in your example there, like the passion behind it, and how someone can so brilliantly describe the why, and for an artist to, hear some sounds off the street and like say, no, I want this on my album, and take those to be session musicians, like that's more than just that. That's a passion. Like that's who they are. Like they have that, like they're seeing that in their head, they're hearing that in their head, like that's, and that shows that he was doing what he should be doing, right? And so yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing to understand why people do what they do and chase what they chase, and choose what to pay and where to put their currencies, right? Like that's really, it's really interesting because everyone thinks about that stuff so differently.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
I remember when I was a kid too. Mm, as in like before I entered school, or maybe up to fifth grade, the
Yeah.
people I revere the most are like company executives. I'm thinking about people like Gates and Jobs and Stephen Ellison and the Google
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I got older, despite the fact that I still find them to be remarkable people,
Mhm.
that is not the career path that I want to chase. But first, because I'm
Mhm.
not good at math and I'm not good at business. So yeah, probably.
Well, and there's high cost, like, do you listen to Simon Sinek at all?
I've heard of him. Tell me about him.
Yeah, he's great. You should listen to him. He just has he talks a lot about just leadership and team building and a bunch of things. He's a motivational speaker in a bunch of ways, but he's also like just he's just a guy who talks how it is, and he talks a lot about those things, is how, like, people like that, like how do you get there and what does that look like, and not everyone should be doing that, because not everyone is built to do that. And I think it's like kind of points back to self-awareness. So if you're self-aware enough that you know that those aren't your strengths, and that's fine, then that like you need to act and live in a way that is most meaningful for you, um and is going to get the best, like make your aura as bright as it can be, and like make you as invested as you can be in what you're doing. And if that's a different path, that's not the type of path of like a Steve Jobs, then 100%, right? Like do that, because I think I just don't like it when I see people miserable at what they're doing.
Mhm,
If it, like, but at the same time, different life circumstances, like sometimes you can't help it, there's things, but like if you're in a position to do things to fuel your cup, which you obviously are, which is really good, um that's good. I'm always happy to see that, because I think that we all have our responsibility to do that for ourselves,
mhm.
right? So no, I totally agree with you. And I also think, like, look Simon Sinek up after this. Like he has a lot of good talks. Even if you just follow him on like social media, you'll see his reels and stuff. And there's always like these 20-second clips of just some really good um concepts to kind of think about.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for recommending him to me. So
Mhm.
what I was getting at with your friend, the executive, is that I think another cost that she maybe she hasn't realized, and many of the people in her
Yeah.
position, or those who are of a higher income bracket, do not realize, is that once you attain that level of success, the nature of your work is very much different from that of your subordinate, and
Mhm.
so goes your concerns, and it that is very, very likely to create a massive distance between you and the people who are working under you, and that your subordinates do not see you as anything other than an executive, and of course you vice versa. But at the same time, you cannot really talk about your work with your
Mhm.
subordinates without them being entirely confused about the nature of your work, and vice versa. So, and I think if you are attuned to American and Canadian politics like I am,
Mhm.
that social difference is uh, transfusing into how the bitterness and the division that haunts Western politics these days, in that you have a class of people who have, because of the nature of their work, is I think removed from even their workplace, as well as any interaction, meaningful interaction with the people that they work with or work under. So so it's like two people speaking two very different languages in the same, even in the same like country or neighborhood.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's a gap, right? And I think like, and I'm trying to think of any organizations I know that do this really well that I'm aware of, but essentially, like, there needs to be awareness of like staff at all levels knowing and understanding the vision and the direction and the value sets of an organization, and so that like that gap you're talking about can be as minimal as possible, because you're right, like when that gets really big, there's a lot of disconnects, and that impacts a bunch of things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
totally.
I know that there's that great TV show 30 Rock, by Tina
Oh,
Fey.
I've heard of it. I've never watched it, but I've heard of it.
So Alec Baldwin plays the CEO of I guess NBC, and
Okay.
there was this one episode where he surveys, well, he tries to understand what it's like to, to work and live as the lowest member of the company. So he walks around and act as if he's a page, as in kind of like a tour guide, and he
Hmm.
gets like bossed around by, his employee, who's like the same fellow tour guide, and it's very funny. But that idea can be, I think, can be translated into, real life too, where, these corporate leaders, uh, I think it's something that they have to do, uh, to ensure that they not only know what it's like to live there, live in
Hmm.
the other people's shoes, but also
Hmm.
to calibrate, his or her ship so as
Hmm.
to be more beneficial to them.
Yeah, it's funny. Even so I used to work HR in a let's say in a retail environment, and a manufacturing environment. And one of the biggest issues that came up was when there's issues between managers and leadership and some workers, was that like the managers didn't know their job. So they couldn't properly support them. And it's not to say that like I think certain competencies are 100% translatable, but I think there is a respect that comes from staff when they know you can do the work and can I think that's definitely a thing. And so yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I've seen that ideology like in real life, where staff look for that. They say, well, he doesn't know anything about my job, or like she doesn't know anything about my job as my manager. And it's like, well, right, like it's not wrong. And if people, how are they supposed to feel supported if they feel that they're not understood and their position isn't understood by the person who's managing them? So I think there definitely needs to be those gaps need to be like as minimal as possible, right?
Mhm.
So, and people need to focus on the connection pieces and knowledge transfer pieces to do that. So yeah, it's a very interesting conversation, like organizational design and leadership in general. And yeah, and you're right, the costs of being in different positions and addressing certain career paths, things you have to be conscious of, right? Because sometimes there's so many things to be conscious of that, but you don't want to lose track of the things that are the foundational pillars of whatever you're doing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Of course, there's that novel that everybody knows, George Orwell's 1984. It's funny because it took me years to finally read this, but I've only tuned into like these 1984 analogies made by other people to describe certain things, past and present, that I
Yeah.
that I can sort of map out the plot or piece together a plot
Mhm.
point. But
Yeah.
I think one of the aspects in 1984 that is very undermentioned is the utter banality and almost like tyrannical banality of life in the office. to fill in, the main character of 1984 is this guy named Winston Smith, and he works for the government, and
Mhm.
he works in a department where I think where whose sole job is to falsify what has came before in order to make it so that the party is responsible for everything good and those who are outside of the party is responsible for everything bad.
Mhm.
But there's an aspect of like boredom and and devoid of meaning that Winston's workplace possess, in that he doesn't find his work fulfilling, and every day is the same, and everyone dresses the same, and everyone works in the same workplace setting. So when you put that to today's office circumstances, despite of what that Steve Carell show would have you convinced, office life
Right.
is almost the same way. You go into work, you dress the same as other people, you are limited in your own cubicle, and you do the kind of work that when you finish your day, you don't find any sense or meaning or fulfillment doing so.
Right.
And I know that I know that in the Western world we are proud of being free and not being communist and whatnot, but I I I think people should be aware that the office space is kind of communistic in its nature, if not in its like formation in general. Yeah.
I think that like goes back to what we were kind of talking about before, though, where it's like people need to be accountable to do things that fill their cup. And if it's not their job, what is it? Do you know what I mean? Because like, I know a lot of people aren't in the position to necessarily like change their job. Like people have responsibilities and stuff, but at the same time, like if we have awareness that we're not fulfilled. So like you're saying Winston has that awareness. Well, what are we doing to address that? Right. Because like for me, I think it's such an important thing to live a life where there's some sort of fulfillment from somewhere. And if it's not your job, like is it what hobbies are you doing, or what passion projects are you doing, or what are you investing time into to get some sort of fulfillment? Because um I know me personally, and I I would I can't imagine not doing the things that I love. Like it's like I don't I have a job and I love my job and I work really hard at my job. Um, but it's not my life. Like my life is, where I choose to put and kind of water my passions and the people in my life. And that study they do, this has come up so much in recently, where they say like they interviewed like 100 people at their end of life stages, and not one person wished they like worked more in their like 9 to 5 job or in their career type thing. Have you heard about that study? Like not one
No,
person has said.
do tell me.
So basically, like, and I don't know who did it, but I'm sure you could find it on Google. But essentially, like, they did this study where a bunch of researchers like interviewed a bunch people who were kind of at their end of life stages and asked what their regrets were and stuff like that. And apparently, like, the findings of that were that not one person said they wish they worked more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's like people said they wish they spent more time with their family, they wish whatever. So I think like that concept of in that book of that guy not being fulfilled is kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning. It's like, well, like, yeah, like people need to do things that fill their cup. And sometimes I understand it's not easy. People have responsibilities, but it's like, what can you do, or what can you involve yourself in where you're getting some sort of meaning? Because I think living life without meaning is a huge disservice to you, to everyone as an individual, right? Like I think we find meaning in things that we're passionate about, and all of us were meant to spread some kind of light to the world, right? Like we all impact people around us, so we have to make sure we're doing those things that allow us to do that. That's just like that's kind of my mindset at least, but yeah.
I should add that I hate the Steve Carell Office show.
I kind of picked up on that.
I prefer the original British comedy series with Ricky Gervais because it has its own character and it ended where it's supposed to end. Whereas, that Steve
Yeah.
Carell show, it went on forever and it ended with everybody in the exact same position that they were 9 years ago when the show began. And it creates an utter utopian fantasy about what it's like to live, to be in a dull boring and mind-numbing workplace as the office. That's not the place where you find deep friendships, let alone romantic relationships. Is where I guess creativity and the human spirit goes to die. So, you know.
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, like, honestly, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I can't say that I've watched too much of The Office. I can't say that I have watched that show. So I know of it and I've seen like clips of it or whatever, but I've never sat down and watched a whole episode.
I think you know, the amount of clips from The Office that I've been shared by people as well as these gifs, I think it gives me a good idea of what that show is. I haven't even sat down and watched like one full-length episode, but you know, based on all these like weird memes and gifs and you know,
Yeah.
quotes and everything, I sort of know what the show is about, and I don't like it. But I think to go back to your point about finding meaning in life, so the title of the show is Unlicensed Philosophy.
Yeah.
I, I've over the years I've managed to pivot to talking to many people who are philosophically inclined, particularly in
Yeah.
the realm of politics. But you know, even if you are a philosopher and not involve yourself in politics in any way, you do realize that the reason why everyone, including myself, have had trouble finding meaning in their lives is that their value system is completely out of whack, and that is the consequences of our hypermodern society. Um,
Mhm.
you know, one I think two really big problems that this society you know, features and what everyone is struggling to get out of is one is materialism, in that they believe that the material is all there is,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's no room for the spirit or the spiritual, let alone the religious. And secondly is hedonism, the idea that the purpose of life is to accumulate as much pleasure for yourself as possible and to avoid as much pain to yourself as possible. So those two do not leave room for anyone else but yourself.
Yeah.
So, and it was the great Edmund Burke, the 18th century thinker, who says that the responsibility of society is not just for the living, but for the dead as well as the unborn. So
Mhm.
So he believes that to the dead we owe tradition. So these values that were handed down to us from one generation to the other, and it's
Mhm.
our duty to uphold them in order to pay respects to the dead. And the responsibility for the unborn is that we have to build a society in which um, those who are not yet to be born can live more prosperously than we do, while enjoying the same benefits that we have
Mhm.
as present day people, and maybe alleviate some of the hardships and struggles that we have had. And I think both materialism and hedonism have discarded our present day responsibility with both the dead and the unborn. You know.
Yeah, honestly, like it's an I we could talk for hours, but I think like I'm a very I agree with you. I think there's a lot of value sets in tradition that are really important. And the comment I kind of made earlier about like showing up for people and making sure other people have encouragement, like we if we live in a way that is only self-serving, you don't really achieve anything because I think like how the saying it takes a community to raise a child, or like it's a team effort. Like people need other people, right? And like I truly believe in any aspect you are always better with people around you and people who have skill sets and whatever your goals are, whatever you're achieving. But the concept of like community, really really important, right? And like I agree with you. I think it's really important to honor things from the past, and not to say certain things can't progress, but like but also the comment you made about making a world that's prosperous and good for our children. very, very interesting, because I think there's a lot, I don't know. I don't know right now if I would say I wouldn't be concerned about, my child like growing up in certain ways in Western society. Like there are some concerns around that. And I think like, and it's just because the value sets of people are so different. And it doesn't mean necessarily like I would never say someone else's value set is wrong, but some of the strong values that like I hold as an individual, um, around community and stuff like that, lots of people don't share those things anymore. Right. So it's kind of like, well, and I guess that means you just find people who do and you kind of work within that. But I agree, we all have a high responsibility to each other in society. And I agree with you. I think that's been lost in a lot of ways with a lot of people for sure. And whether it's materialism or certain things that have caused that. I don't think social media helps. I think the validation that people seek from, and even as an artist, like it's really hard because like social media is a really important thing for people in the arts and whatever. It really is, but it's a really hard thing. Because I think there's so many of us who just don't love being on social media all the time. It's, you know what I mean? It kind of creates takes attention away from areas that I would like my attention to be sometimes. And so balancing that is also really hard. But I totally understand what you're saying. And I think it's a really important discussion that I wish people had more, honestly.
Well,
I don't know if I've ever talked about this with somebody, but I agree with you. Like outside of my personal circle, like me and my friends talk about this stuff and whatever, but I don't know if I've ever had like somebody say to me like, traditional value sets and responsibility to our elders, the people have passed, and the responsibility we have to people coming into the world. What does that look like? Like that's really important conversation, but I don't know if people think about stuff like that.
I see. Yeah, and of course I cannot claim credit for it. Like these are insights
Oh
gained
no.
for people like who lived and died long before I do. Um,
Yeah.
I think I would recommend a great book called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self by Carl Truman, and
Okay.
um, it it's a philosophical understanding of how the self came to be, in that uh, this is the fact that we think of ourselves or myself or whatnot is not has not been with us since time immemorial. It's a very modern idea, and
Yeah.
mm, I think it started with that French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but you see it in today's language too. Like you have your self-care, self-love, self-taught, self-loathing, self-image, and all of these words that has self as a prefix, and we are so accustomed to it, um, um, because ever since the idea of the self is invented, um, we have tailored all of our needs and wants and desire to one entity, and that is the self. And there can be certain benefits in that, if we are more introspective and we are more inward looking, then we can we can be more attuned to the feelings of others, and that's where the feeling of empathy comes from. And
Mm-hmm.
lots of great art and music comes from being introspective, but at the same time, this this altering of our gaze towards ourselves rather than the world or other people, um, makes for a very alienating society, in that it is a kind of every man for himself kind of world, and many people, including myself, feel constantly alienated from that.
Um, yeah, and I think I think there's a lot of I know a concept that comes up in my kind of conversation with people around me, is like, yeah, the concept of alienation, but like just loneliness also, like feeling very alone in things. And that's a very interesting concept of I don't know, you're right though, the term, the language, right, the language we use on a consistent basis of self-love, self-talk, self-harm, self this and this, like I don't actually, and I'd be interested to maybe look into that further, but at what point did that really start coming into being, and the shift happening from more yeah, because I think that probably feeds a lot into a lot of mental health things and other things that society has seen, and is seeing, right? I think that a lot of those things could possibly be linked, and it's very interesting,
Mhm.
right? Very interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it goes back to my initial concern about people who I grew up with, who has like 5-year plans and whatnot. And I
Yeah.
can assure you that in none of those 5-year plans that they have created do they involve other people. So
Yeah.
in that they don't involve what to what to get to, you know, how to treat your mom and dad with, you know, the kind of care and appreciation that they deserve, let alone their grandparents. It doesn't involve getting married and having kids, and you know what kind of person would fulfill their lives, and how you, the person who's making the plan, would fulfill the others' lives, and what do you have to owe to your the friends that you've made in the past, as well as the friends that you will make in the future, as well as the community that you happen to find yourself in. So these
Mhm.
5-year plans will include obviously the school that you want to go to, as well as the job that you like, as well as the firm that you like to be in, and the kind of salary and net income that you want. But there's no room for other people.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I'd be interested to like, I think that'd be a really interesting like research project to like do with like a group of high school students or something, or people in university, and just like different stages in their life. Because I think that like depending also on when you ask these people of what, based on whether, I think that would also be really indicative of what would be on that. But yeah, like um yeah, it's interesting. Like I like I said, like community and family is just, it's really important. And that study that I was referencing, no, that's what people talked about, where was those things, not work or pay grades or anything like that. And so it's just interesting to see where people's values kind of align, and how our daily actions either contribute to our kind of value set pillars and passions, and family community stuff, or if it kind of contributes more to um whatever else, those other things. And I think different people value different stuff. So you're right, but that's, I mean, that's the cost of it, right? It's, you can't do 100% both ways, right? And that's what I think, Simon Sinek was talking about, where every path you choose, there's a cost, and it's just if people are willing to pay that or not. But I think that's how we're seeing the changes in society, where people are willing to not put more here and put more here, based on whatever reason they are doing that. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it does show that you have I think everyone has priorities, and I think it's important that
Yeah.
we set our priorities straight, in that we know what is important for us,
Mhm.
and I think it should be less self-directed than and more other outwardly directed.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like I think um if I were to say what my priorities are right now, like just off the top of my head, like I would say they're my family, my music, and probably my family, my music, and like my overall general health and wellness and stuff. But I think like, but also like there's things in the community, like I'm passionate about some certain things, and there's some things I want to do with that. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's like I care about my career, and I do it, and I do a good job at it. I care about it, but I don't know if it would make my priority list, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
But yeah, I bet some people are completely opposite than that. They would say the other, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, just
Yeah.
everyone's different.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And right. I I do think that this kind of 5-year plan mentality that I was talking about, it has the fundamental assumption that you alone are the author of your own life. And I think that is far from correct. I think everybody knows that you cannot live on your own, and we are social creatures, so we depend on the, I guess, the thoughts and
Yeah.
the love and or hate of other people to contribute to our self-image.
And like even the concept of mentorship and coaching, like do people who have like we look up to, like, they all contribute to our path, right? And when like there's 100% people help people, and like we might be the leaders in our own life, but we're definitely not the sole authors. And I think that's actually really a really interesting, like that's a really good way to put that, actually. Very
Um,
good. You're right. It isn't that is not correct. Like there's
so to end this discussion, I would like to ask you the same question that I've asked every other musician who's been on the show. What does music
sure
mean to you?
music. Um, like I could say like music is my life, but I think that's a really like generalized answer. Like um music is it's my heart. Like it's what I do when I'm like not consciously thinking. I'm singing, I'm humming, I'm doing something. It's literally my foundational pillar, and something that I use and that kind of just shows up in everything I'm doing. It's just it's my heart, and I overall like I'm really happy and to be able to make music and start to share it with people. And but at the same time, like I'll always be such a fan of other artists, and I show up and I sing and I go to concerts and I just enjoy it because of the connection it has to people. So for me, it's just it's such a glue that is part of who I am and sticks me together, but also connects me to everywhere else in my life. So it's uh it's quite a powerful thing, music.
Well, on that
Yeah.
note, thank you very much, Robyn Ashley of Edmonton, Alberta, for joining
Thank
this
you,
program.
Sean. Have a good day. It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.